Today we celebrate the 13th Sunday of the ordinary time of the church year. Now, the church year is divided between major feasts and seasons, the Advent, Christmas, Epiphany cycle, and the Lenten, Easter, Pentecost cycle. This second cycle is followed by two major feasts of Trinity Sunday and Corpus Christi Sunday, which we have just celebrated in the past 2 weekends. So now we return to the ordinary time of the church year. Oftentimes on this first Sunday when we return to ordinary time, I like to reflect on time, the mystery of time, how we use time, what makes time significant in our lives. But this year, rather than going down that road, I would like to spend a few minutes with you reflecting on the other word in the phrase, ordinary time, namely, ordinary. First, one small clarification. When we say ordinary time, we do not mean that in contrast to extraordinary time, like the special feasts and seasons I mentioned just a minute ago, Christmas and Easter, etc. No, ordinary time comes from the Latin word ordo, which means regular or consecutive, following an order, sequential. So the ordinary time of the church year passes from the week after the end of Christmas season until Lent begins, and then from after Pentecost until the Feast of Christ the King in November. So the bulk of the church year is taken up with ordinary time. I suppose we could conclude that the bulk of our own lives are also taken up with ordinary time. But again, when we use the word ordinary, this does not mean insignificant. On the contrary, all time is valuable, every moment is precious, and every day is irreplaceable. There is a certain irony in the fact that we can have certain days of great significance in our lives only because we have lived through hundreds of ordinary days to get there. Through hundreds and hundreds of ordinary days must be lived well to achieve significant milestones. We can only celebrate anniversaries of marriage or milestones in career, the musical recitals or sports events of our children because they all acknowledge the accomplishments that were achieved by regular, consistent, patient, faithful attention to the responsibilities at hand day after day. You can only gather friends and family for your golden wedding anniversary or retire from your company after decades of service if you have been faithfully fulfilling your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly responsibilities. Last Sunday, for example, we celebrated Father's Day, a celebration of all the ordinary days of ordinary lives filled with labor and love that men devote to their families. It was a day of celebration for all the faithfulness in good times and in bad, all the sacrifices large and small, all the actions seen and unseen that brought security, safety, joy, and peace to families. For the last 2 years, we have been living through a pandemic, and what we all took for granted about time suddenly stopped. Perhaps we can see this time in which we were living as a grace that enabled us to step back and see things in a new way, and perhaps appreciate everything and everyone more deeply, and live more fully. And that brings us to the second application of the word ordinary, and that is to ourselves, our lives, and to the people in our lives, and to the people around us, even those we do not know. Now, last Sunday, as I stood at the altar, I was watching the congregation coming forward for communion. Now, this was something I've probably done thousands of times in my years of ministry. But this time, it was different. Suddenly, I realized, as I had never done before, how absolutely unique each and every individual is. Now, we all know abstractly that we're all different and we're all unique, but this time I realized it in my gut, how each person has their own set of relationships, their unique experiences, their unique story. No two are ever alike. Even identical twins are not the same. If only we could be aware of that, of how special we are in God's love. God has never created anyone in the whole of history, in the whole history of the world, like you or like me. It reminded me of the wonderful testimony that the great spiritual master and writer-monk Thomas Merton gave of an insight he had on an ordinary day. On March 18, 1958, Thomas Merton was running errands in downtown Louisville when he had an experience that would change his life and influence countless others. The spot where it happened is actually marked with a historical marker, probably the only one in the United States that marks a mystical experience. Merton described it this way in his book, Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. He wrote, "In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world, the world of renunciation and supposed holiness. This sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud. Now I realize what we all are. And if only everybody could realize this. But it cannot be explained. There's no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. But sisters and brothers, I'm going to tell you, and I hope you will dare to believe me, that as Merton said, you are walking around shining like the sun. You are God's unique creation, God's unique gift to the world at this time. Every day you live, as ordinary as it may seem, has never been lived before. Every breath you take, every word you speak, every step you move has never been lived before. You are unique. You are loved by God. You are extraordinary in the most ordinary of ways. Please know and please believe you are walking around shining like the sun.